All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're tackling a topic that feels incredibly personal to millions, but as we'll see, is also a huge public issue, the motherhood paradox. You've probably heard that phrase a million times, right? The best and hardest job in the world. But what if that's not just some tired cliche? What if it's a real, genuine paradox that gets to the very heart of a major conflict in modern parenting? And here it is, laid out plain and simple. On one hand, being a mother can be a source of incredible meaning, just this deep, lasting satisfaction with your life. But then, on the flip side, the day-to-day reality, it's often packed with more stress, more hassles, and way more anxiety compared to fathers or people who aren't parents. So how on earth can both of these things be true at the exact same time? To really get our heads around this, we first have to be super clear about what we even mean by happiness. Turns out, researchers break it down into two totally different ideas. Okay, so first up, you've got something called Hedonia. The easiest way to think about this is your daily emotional weather report. It's all about feeling good right now. Pleasure, comfort, a lack of stress. It's the simple joy of a quiet cup of coffee. And it's also the sheer frustration of a toddler having a meltdown in the middle of the grocery store. And then you have eudaimonia. Now, this is the big picture stuff. This isn't about those fleeting, in-the-moment feelings. This is about a deep, long-term sense of purpose, of growth, of meaning. It's that feeling that your life has a real direction and that what you're doing actually matters. And here is where it gets really fascinating. These two concepts map perfectly onto the experience of motherhood. The research is super clear. That daily, in-the-moment happiness, the hedonic stuff, is often lower for mothers, especially when the kids are young and the childcare is intense. But that long-term sense of meaning, the eudaimonic side, is consistently higher than it is for non-parents. That right there, that's the trade-off at the very core of the paradox. This quote just nails it. That deep sense of purpose, it acts like a psychological buffer. It doesn't make the daily stress disappear, not at all, but it makes it manageable. It creates what one source calls a storm-resilient joy, this amazing kind of fulfillment that can actually exist right alongside all the difficulty. So right about now, you might be thinking, okay, this is an interesting psychological tug of war, but it sounds like a private, personal issue. The research, though, makes a very different argument, that a mother's well-being is actually a critical public health issue. The link here is incredibly direct and powerful. A mother's life satisfaction isn't just about her own happiness. It's one of the single strongest predictors of her child's future well-being and success. Everything from their social skills all the way to their cognitive development. And let's put a hard number on that. One study found that kids whose mothers reported being in poor health were a staggering 32% less likely to flourish themselves. So the point is, a mother's well-being has this direct, measurable, generational impact. It ripples outward. And all of this leads to a really powerful conclusion. This idea that mothers need to mother themselves first, it's not selfish. In fact, according to the data, it's a fundamental prerequisite for effective parenting. It's one of the best preventative measures we have for family health. Okay, so if all of this maternal stress is such a big problem, where is it coming from? Is it just, an unavoidable part of raising kids? The data suggests the answer is a definitive no. The problem isn't personal, it's structural. So researchers talk about this thing called the parental happiness penalty. It's basically the gap in happiness between parents and non-parents. But here's the kicker. That penalty isn't the same everywhere, not even close. In fact, it varies wildly from one country to the next. Just take a look at this chart. Among 22 different countries that were studied, the United States has the absolute largest happiness penalty for parents. They're significantly less happy than non-parents, but then look at a country like Norway. The gap is actually positive. Parents there are happier than their childless peers. So what in the world is going on? And this, right here, is the single most important takeaway from all the research. The entire happiness gap, all of it, is explained by one thing: whether or not a country has social policies that actually support parents and help them combine work and family life. It's not about culture, it's about policy. And what happens is this lack of policy creates a really destructive feedback loop. Let's walk through it. First, you have a lack of policy support, like affordable childcare. That puts a huge burden on families. Step 2, that pressure often forces mothers into being the essential parent, the one who has to pull back on her career.
And then third, that reality reinforces this cultural idea of intensive mothering. The belief that it's a mother's job to be completely consumed by her kids' needs. And that ideology makes it harder to get policy support. And the cycle just keeps going.
And that big feedback loop, it shows up as very specific, very real daily stressors. You've got that impossible conflict between being an ideal worker on the job and a good mother at home. You have the crushing weight of that intensive mothering ideology we just talked about. And of course, there's the invisible but totally exhausting mental load, all that thinking and planning and organizing that has to happen around a household, which still falls disproportionately on mothers. So if the problem is structural, then the solution has to be structural too. And here's the really good news. We know exactly what works. The research points to two absolute game changers, societal investments that pretty much eliminate that parental happiness penalty. Number one, universal, affordable, and high-quality childcare. And number two, mandatory, generous, paid parental leave for both parents. And that both is key because it encourages equal caregiving right from the start. And here's our really critical point to make. This is not a zero-sum game. The data shows pretty clearly that these policies make parents' lives better without making non-parents' lives worse. It's truly a rising tide that lifts all boats. It's about building a healthier, more productive society by investing in the well-being of families. Which brings us to our final question for you to think about. After seeing the deep connection between a mother's well-being, her child's development, and the proven power of public policy, we really have to ask, is a mother's happiness just a private individual pursuit, or is it one of the most important public investments a society can possibly make in its own future?